3 days before he was supposed to race in one of NASCAR's most prestigious events, he was rushed to hospital with a severe illness. He never made it back out. The man who had won more races than any driver in the history of NASCAR's 3 national series, 234 of them, was gone at 41 years old. Not in a crash, not on the track he dominated for 2 decades, but suddenly and without warning, in a way nobody saw coming. His name was Kyle Busch, and if you think you already know his story, you don't. Because the version NASCAR showed the world was only half of it. Las Vegas, 1985. A mechanic named Tom Busch is raising 2 boys in the kind of household where racing isn't a hobby, it's a language. The older son, Kurt, is already turning heads on go-kart tracks before he's old enough to drive legally. The younger one, Kyle, watches everything Kurt does and then tries to do it faster. Kyle Busch grew up racing go-karts in cul-de-sacs and parking lots near his home. He moved to Legends cars at the Las Vegas Bull Ring and then into full-bodied late-model competition before most teenagers had figured out their weekend plans. By the time he was 18, he was in NASCAR's top division, the Cup Series, racing for Hendrick Motorsports, one of the most powerful organizations in the sport. Then Hendrick cut him loose to make room for Dale Earnhardt Jr. Think about that for a second. He was a teenager. He had done nothing wrong. He was simply told that the most popular name in the sport needed his seat, and he was out. Most 20-year-olds would have crumbled under that. Kyle Busch turned it into a mission statement. He landed at Joe Gibbs Racing in 2008, behind the wheel of the number 18 Toyota, and the transformation began. He didn't just want to win. He wanted to prove that the kid Hendrick threw away was better than the sport had decided he was. For the next 15 years, race by race, he made that argument in the loudest possible way. And if you think the early years at JGR were just happy victories and podium champagne, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. The nickname came from the film Days of Thunder, a character named Rowdy Burns, fast, unpredictable, and not particularly concerned with what anyone thought of him. Kyle Busch earned it honestly. In 2008, with 3 laps to go at Richmond, he spun out Dale Earnhardt Jr., the most popular driver in NASCAR, in a battle for the lead. The crowd turned on him instantly and completely. Fans began booing Busch at every race, sometimes loudly enough to drown out the announcer. The hostility reached a level that, years later, Kyle would describe as receiving death threats. Not online noise. Actual threats serious enough that he discussed them openly on Dale Jr.'s podcast. He didn't back down. He won races, got in fights, threw his hands device at a competitor's passing car on pit road at Charlotte, punched Joey Logano on pit road in Las Vegas, publicly called out rivals by name, and told one journalist plainly, "Sometimes you just don't like a guy." Fact of the matter. NASCAR CEO Steve O'Donnell later recalled that Busch once pretended to be seriously injured after hitting a wall at Texas, just to mock NASCAR's safety protocols. He laid flat on a pit cart and played dead while officials watched. O'Donnell said he was furious at the time. Looking back, he called it hilarious. The sport called him a villain. Sponsors called him difficult. Fans who hated him still showed up to watch him. He called it motivation. But here's the part that changes everything about what you just heard. What most people watching Kyle Busch on a Sunday afternoon never saw was what was happening at home during the week. Kyle met Samantha Sheets in 2008, the same year he joined Joe Gibbs Racing. They married on New Year's Eve 2010 in a ceremony that looked, from the outside, like the picture-perfect NASCAR fairy tale. What the cameras didn't follow was the years of struggle that came after. Kyle and Samantha spent years trying to start a family. They went through infertility treatments, multiple rounds of IVF, and miscarriages. Samantha became one of the more public voices in NASCAR about the emotional weight of infertility, sharing their experience in interviews and on social media, at a time when that kind of honesty from a racing family was rare. Kyle supported her publicly and quietly, and neither of them made it a performance. They just kept going. In 2015, their son Brexton was born. That same year, Kyle Busch won his first NASCAR Cup Series championship. In 2022, their daughter Lennox arrived via surrogate. Kyle said at the time that becoming a father again did not make all the struggles of the last couple of years go away. He kept his racing life and his personal life deliberately separate, but those who were paying attention noticed that something had shifted in him off the track. The anger that powered the early years had been joined by something quieter. One phone call, one conversation. That's all it took to change the direction of everything. For years, Kyle Busch and Dale Earnhardt Jr. existed in a Cold War. The 2008 Richmond incident had calcified into years of mutual friction. Busch was the villain of Dale Jr.'s fan base. Dale was the symbol of everything the crowd wanted Busch to lose to. Then Kyle reached out. On Dale Jr.'s podcast, the two sat down and talked through it. Earnhardt later posted publicly about the moment, saying Kyle was the one who initiated the conversation, that he came to Dale's bus, sat down, and the two of them worked through what had been between them for years. Earnhardt described it as something he was grateful for, something he hadn't expected. The man the sport cast as its villain was the one who reached out first. He didn't have to. His reputation didn't require it. The sport wouldn't have demanded it. He did it anyway. That same quality, the refusal to let things stay broken, showed up again in 2022, when his brother Kurt's career was ended by a concussion. Kyle had spent 15 years racing in Kurt's shadow, and then alongside him at the highest level. When Kurt stepped away, Kyle said almost nothing publicly. The loss landed differently than a race result. What happened next is the reason this story spread across the internet. After 15 years at Joe Gibbs Racing, Kyle Busch didn't leave on his own terms. The team lost its primary sponsor heading into 2023, and the financial math no longer worked. JGR couldn't afford to keep him without a sponsor to fund the seat. The man who had delivered 2 championships and helped build one of NASCAR's most successful eras was effectively priced out of the organization he'd called home since 2008. Kyle Busch's wife Samantha described the end of the JGR chapter as overwhelming. She wrote publicly that closing the books on 15 years, the people, the relationships, the culture, was something she struggled to put into words. Kyle was more blunt. He said he needed a place where he could hit reset and be welcomed, just as I am. He had spent 15 years winning for a team that ultimately couldn't afford to keep him. Now, walking toward the podium to announce his move to Richard Childress Racing, he turned to his son Brexton backstage and joked about doing a mic drop and walking out. Brexton told him he'd heard that. The move to RCR started well. He won 3 races in the first half of 2023, including a record-setting victory at Gateway that gave him 19 consecutive seasons with at least 1 win, breaking a tie with Richard Petty. Then the wins stopped. 2024 came and went without a Cup victory for the first time in his career. 2025 brought no wins either. He missed the playoffs 2 years in a row. The rebuild he was promised stalled. His crew chief stepped down. A new one came in. The final chapter looked nothing like the middle ones. At this point in the story, most people walked away. What he did instead is the part nobody talks about. Kyle Busch never announced retirement plans. Not once during the 2 winless seasons did he say he was done. His contract was extended through 2026. The new crew chief was in place. He turned 41 on May 2. 11 days later, at a race in Watkins Glen, race commentators noted on air that he had been dealing with a sinus cold that week and had asked for medical attention after the race. He asked for a shot from the team doctor on the radio. Nobody thought much of it at the time. On May 20, 2026, a Wednesday, emergency services were called to a training facility in Concord, North Carolina. The caller told dispatch they had an individual with shortness of breath, overheating, and coughing up blood. The patient was still conscious. The ambulance came. The next morning, his family, Richard Childress Racing, and NASCAR issued a joint statement. Kyle Busch had been hospitalized with a severe illness. Hours later, they issued another. He was gone. His final interview in a race setting had been a few weeks earlier. A journalist asked him about cherishing wins, about what they meant at this stage of a career. Kyle Busch said, "You take whatever you can get. You never know when the last one is going to be, so cherish them all, trust me." He was talking about race wins. Here's what the comments kept asking. And here's the answer they never got, until now. The greatest careers in any sport leave behind records. Kyle Busch left behind 234 of them, across 3 divisions, over 22 full-time seasons, in one of the most physically and mentally demanding sports in the world. But records are just numbers. What Kyle Busch left behind that matters more than any win total is a son named Brexton, who is 11 years old and already racing, and who already has an unsigned contract sitting in a drawer at Richard Childress Racing, placed there by Richard Childress himself the day Kyle signed with the team. A promise to a boy who hadn't turned 10 yet that there would be a seat waiting for him someday. Kyle and Brexton raced each other for the first time in March 2025 at Millbridge Speedway in North Carolina. Kyle finished 3rd. Brexton finished 6th. Kyle said he was trying as hard as he could and still couldn't get closer to the front. He sounded genuinely impressed. The man who was fired as a teenager, who fought the entire sport to prove his worth, who made peace with his enemies before he was asked to, who built a family through years of loss and kept it private while doing it. That man was raising a driver. And if Brexton Busch ever makes it to the Cup Series, he will carry a name that means something in every corner of every track in America. Kyle Busch was NASCAR's villain for the years the sport needed one. He turned out to be something more complicated and more human than that label ever allowed for. He never got the farewell he deserved. He never got to see what his son becomes. The sport lost a giant on May 21, 2026. And the most honest thing anyone can say about Kyle Busch is that the full story of what he meant to NASCAR is only just beginning to be told. Do you think Kyle Busch deserved more credit during his career than NASCAR and its fans ever gave him? Or did he bring the criticism on himself? Let me know below.